Hello there guys, how's it going? Zach here. Now in today's video we're going to be taking a look at how often you should renew or replenish your lumber camps when you're chopping wood. I've been examining wood for the last 3 days. I could practically write a book on the topic of gathering wood in Age of Empires 2 now. It's a little bit ridiculous, but I've been looking at tons and tons of different aspects of it, including where best to place your lumber camps, what lumber lines to choose, how many villagers to a lumber camp, when specifically to get the upgrades. And I'll cover those things in other videos from now. In this video, we'll be looking specifically at the replenishment rates of lumber camps. I know what some of you might be thinking, whoa, hang on a minute, there's already a video out there covering this topic. Now, the reason why I want to make this video is a couple of things. First of all, I keep getting messages from you guys saying to me, ZeroEmpires, you keep replenishing your lumber camps too soon. ZeroEmpires, all the expert players are building their lumber camps too early. They need to build them later on, like the Spirit of the Law video suggests. Now, no disrespect to Spirit of the Law at all. I think the videos that he creates are really good, and I really like the idea of applying maths to Age of Empires 2. In fact, he's got some really creative ideas, and some of the video ideas are very unique. That's really cool, and he's doing a great thing for the Age of Empires community. However, in this situation, I have to disagree with the method that he used to draw his conclusion in that video. Now, that video is linked in the description to this video, so I would suggest checking it out and seeing what conclusion is drawn there. I will sum it up in this video as well. What Spirit of the Law does in this video is take 15 villagers and get them to chop wood for an hour on one lumber camp. He then compares the total wood gathered to the alternative, which is to build lumber camps regularly in the wood line and then see how much wood they've gathered after an hour's worth of cutting. I have a few concerns with this method, and I'll talk through them first of all. Firstly, the number of villagers on a lumber camp. In no real situation should there ever be 15 villagers chopping wood on a single lumber camp. Players just don't do that. In fact, most top players will never have more than 10 villagers to a lumber camp. So I'm pretty damn certain that the number of villagers on a single lumber camp will affect the results. The second quarrel I have is the way that the new lumber camps are placed when testing the placement of new lumber camps. He places them quite sporadically. There's no real system to where they are placed, and they're certainly not placed in the most efficient places possible. I'm pretty certain that if he placed the lumber camps in more efficient positions and placed them properly with the correct number of villagers on the wood line, that the results would be a lot different. Further to this, the test was done with Dark Age villagers, so no research upgrades were taken into consideration for the entire time that the villagers were chopping, which is again not representative of a real game in any situation. So, whilst the conclusions that Spirit of the Law draws in this video are certainly correct for the very specific setup that he has, I don't feel like they actually translate into a real game situation. The advice at the end of the video only really applies to you if you overcrowd your lumber camps, replace them sporadically, and don't upgrade your villagers in any way for 40 minutes, which is not representative of a real game ever. So I wanted to redo the test and actually model it on a real game situation and see what kind of results we got. Do they vary from the video here, or will they be different? And more importantly, draw a conclusion here that's going to have some meaning in a real Black Forest situation. I'm not really going to be applying much maths either, because we don't really need to. We simply need to test each of the different setups and see which ones gives the best results. So the method that I'm going to use is going to be as accurate as possible to a standard Black Forest game, taking a look at just one lumber camp during the process of that game. What I've done is set up a single lumber camp on a really thick, solid wood line. I've then put 8 villagers on that lumber camp with 4 on each side. This is fairly representative of what most players will have on a single lumber camp on average for the course of the game. I'll have these 8 villagers chop at the wood for 40 minutes exactly. And what will happen is that the research technologies that relate to wood chopping will be researched at the average time or the typical time that they would be researched in a standard Black Forest match. So, at 13 minutes and 30 seconds of chopping, the bit axe research will be done. At 16 minutes, the bow saw research will be done. At 19 minutes, wheelbarrow will be researched. At 25 minutes, handcart will be researched, and at 30 minutes, two-man saw will be researched. These researches are really important because they affect how villagers chop wood in different ways. Firstly, the bit axe, the bow saw, and the two-man saw affects how quickly the villagers chop wood, whilst wheelbarrow and handcart reduces the amount of time that villagers have to spend walking between the woodline and the lumber camp. So clearly, with bit axe researched, villagers will spend more time walking and less time chopping, and with wheelbarrow researched, villagers will spend more time chopping and less time walking. I'll run this test multiple times, and each time I'll change the number of trees cut before replenishing the lumber camp. So in the first test, I'll replenish the lumber camp every 2 tiles of trees that the villagers cut. And for the final test, I'll replenish the lumber camp every 5 tiles of trees that the villagers cut. At the end of the 40 minutes, we'll consider how much resource is in the bank after all of the lumber camps have been built, and then we'll be able to draw a conclusion of which is the best in terms of resources gathered. So, for the first test, at the end of 40 minutes, my villagers had built 5 new lumber camps, replacing them every 2 tiles, and the total wood collected was 7,456. The test after that, I did the 3 tiles, and there were 3 lumber camps built, and the total wood collected there was 7,630. So there's definitely a little bit of an increase between replacing it 2 tiles apart and 3 tiles apart. The third test was to do it with 4 tiles apart, and this time the result was 7,494 with 2 new lumber camps built. And finally, with 5 tiles, the result was 7,380 with 1 new lumber camp built. So clearly, just by looking at these numbers, we can see that the best result there was to do the replenishment every 3 tiles, which is effectively leaving 1 tile gap between the end of your old lumber camp and the start of your new one. This definitely contradicts the conclusion in Spirit of the Law's video, which said that doing it every 24 minutes, or in the screenshot he posts, every 5 tiles, would have given the best result. In actually testing it out and applying the research technologies and making a simulation that is more closely matched to a real game, we find that that is actually the worst performing time to get it compared to the other times before. Now, I don't want to concern myself too much with the timing on when would be best to build the new lumber camp, because it's not really about timing, because no player can remember exactly what time they built their lumber camps and then replenish them at exactly the right time. Doing it on a tile basis is much more reliable, and obviously here 3 tiles seems to be the best. I also repeated this experiment, and this time I did it with 10 villagers on a single lumber camp instead of 8. This time around, the results had exactly the same pattern. 2 tiles resulted in 9,232 wood collected. 3 tiles resulted in 9,364 wood collected. 4 tiles resulted in 9,300 wood collected, and 5 tiles resulted in 9,021 wood collected, so once again a big drop-off for the 5 tile replenishment, with the 3 tile replenishment clearly being the best option, only if by a small margin. Now, it is worth noting here that the gains that you make by doing this is fairly minimal in the grand scheme of things. But the point is, that is of course going to add up over time. This is just one lumber camp we're talking about, and at the post-imperial stage of the game, it's likely that you'll have 3 or 4 lumber camps with 8 villagers on each, in which case, with the scenario above, we'd actually be gaining a huge amount of additional wood if we replace our camps every 3 tiles rather than every 5. The thing is as well, guys, that this experiment only really works for Black Forest as well. Black Forest is a very popular map, but it's certainly not the only map out there. Maps like Arabia play completely differently because the wood lines are not huge, they're not solid, and eventually, you're going to be splitting your wood lines all over the place. In which case, replenishment rates are also going to differ. So take this advice with the mindset of playing in a Black Forest game and other games where you have really large solid woodlines, because the results are probably going to be very different for maps where the woodlines are a lot smaller. It's the same with many things in Age of Empires too. So much depends on the situation, and the conclusions that you can draw from looking at one set of data is certainly not the only answer to the problem, simply because there's so many different sets of data you could look at. So I hope this video has been useful to you, and you guys will stop messaging me now telling me that all the experts are doing it wrong. Hopefully it's cleared up a few things and you're happy with the results. Obviously, if you think that I've done the experiment wrong in any way, then please let me know, because if I've made a mistake or if the experiment is not really very representative of a real game, or you think that there could be a better way to do it, I want to know and I want to correct things. So thank you very much guys for watching. As always, I've been Zach, and I'll see you next time.